I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen being.
The words were delivered without ceremony, yet they struck Queen Camilla with the force of a public humiliation. A sealed palace statement confirmed that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, would assume the position Camilla had quietly controlled for years. Principal royal hostess and senior female representative at major state and household occasions. Camilla read the announcement twice. Then she lowered the page, stared across the room, and realized the decision had already been made without her. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla sat alone in her morning room as an aide placed the statement beside her breakfast tray. Her fingers tightened around the page when she reached the words, "effective immediately." The appointment was not merely ceremonial. Principal royal hostess and senior female representative meant the person trusted to welcome foreign dignitaries, coordinate senior royal women, advise on precedents, and remain closest to the king during the monarchy's most controlled public occasions. For years, that influence had belonged to her. Charles entered moments later and stopped when he saw the document in her hands. The king offered no comforting explanation. Camilla asked whether he had approved Sophie's appointment, and he slowly removed his glasses before setting them on the table. He told her the decision was necessary for the stability of the household. That phrase cut deeper than anger. It suggested that her authority had become a danger. Camilla searched the page and found more than a signature. She discovered that courtiers, William, Anne, and Charles, had discussed the transfer during a household meeting from which she had been excluded. William had supported the change, Anne had defended it. The monarch had approved it. The exclusion wounded the queen consort more than the title itself, because it proved that those closest to the crown had prepared for her removal while she remained unaware. Sophie, meanwhile, had known for 3 days. The trusted confidant received the letter in private and accepted only after asking for assurance that the announcement would not be used to humiliate Camilla. Her condition revealed restraint, but it also confirmed something devastating. The change had been settled long before the palace placed the statement before the queen. Camilla looked at Charles's signature. The man who had once challenged the institution to protect her had now allowed that institution to replace her. Shock hardened into anger. But the force of the decision could not be understood until the palace examined the two women at its center, one who had fought for decades to be accepted, and another who had earned trust without ever demanding the spotlight. Camilla and Sophie had spent years moving through the same palace corridors, attending the same ceremonies, and serving the same crown. Yet they had never been judged by the same standard. One carried the scars of scandal and survival. The other built her influence through patience, discipline, and silence. Now the position separating them had vanished, leaving both women exposed and forcing Charles to confront which kind of loyalty the monarchy needed most. Camilla had treated the hosting position as more than another royal duty. To her, every state dinner and diplomatic reception proved that the palace had finally accepted her authority. A state dinner was a formal banquet held for visiting leaders, and the woman directing those occasions controlled far more than seating plans. She shaped introductions, guided senior royals, and stood near the king during moments designed to show unity. Losing that responsibility felt like losing evidence that she truly belonged. Sophie had built her influence in a completely different way. She studied protocol, the system of rules governing royal behavior and ceremony, and learned how to prevent small mistakes from becoming public embarrassment. She supported difficult overseas visits, earned the confidence of palace staff, and remained steady during family crises. The trusted confidant rarely demanded attention, yet her calm presence made others turn toward her whenever tension entered the room. Camilla felt that contrast like an accusation. Alone with her dresser, she removed the ceremonial brooch she had planned to wear at the next reception, and held it for several silent seconds. Then she returned it to its case. "Sophie will probably be expected to wear something more suitable now," she said. Her dresser offered reassurance, but the queen consort barely heard it. The closed case seemed to confirm what she feared most. The palace was not simply changing her duties. It was beginning to rewrite her place. Sophie felt no triumph at Bagshot Park. She held the appointment letter while Prince Edward watched her search for the right words. Bagshot Park was their private royal residence, a place normally separated from palace tension, but the decision had followed them home. She told Edward that accepting the role felt like entering a room while another woman's chair was still warm. He reminded her that service sometimes demanded discomfort, yet she remained uneasy about the pain her rise would cause. William had privately supported the appointment because he believed Sophie could unite the working royals without turning every appearance into a contest over rank. The prince understood that his backing gave the change generational weight. Anne had gone further. In a documented account of her conversation with Charles, she said Camilla had begun treating a household responsibility as personal territory, while Sophie treated service as something borrowed from the crown. Charles now wondered whether he had solved a palace problem or created a crisis inside his marriage. Before leaving Camilla's room, the king paused at the door. She refused to look at him. But the rivalry had not begun with this announcement. Its true origin lay in one ceremony months earlier, a moment of confusion, wounded pride, and public embarrassment the palace never forgot. Every palace rupture has a moment that appears insignificant until history circles back to it. For Camilla and Sophie, that moment came during the Commonwealth diplomatic reception at Windsor Castle. A misplaced seating card, a delayed entrance, and one sharp instruction created a fracture no apology could repair. Senior courtiers watched the evening unravel in silence. By the time the final guest departed, Charles understood that the position Camilla guarded so fiercely had become a source of instability. Camilla had already begun tightening her hold over major royal occasions. She wanted final approval over guest placements, entrance order, jewelry choices, and the sequence of speeches. A Commonwealth diplomatic reception was a formal gathering where representatives from member nations met senior royals, making every introduction and position politically sensitive. Several household officials believed her involvement had stopped being procedural. It had become personal, and that shift placed the entire evening under strain. Sophie had quietly filled the gaps whenever the Queen reduced her schedule. She received visiting guests, steadied difficult engagements, and earned the confidence of staff who needed decisions without drama. The trusted confidant never openly challenged Camilla, but her success created a contrast the palace could no longer ignore. Where one woman demanded control, the other seemed to gain authority without asking for it. The breaking point arrived at Windsor. Charles's office instructed Sophie to stand beside the king and welcome a visiting delegation, because Camilla was delayed. The arrangement carried his direct approval. Yet when the Queen entered and saw Sophie near the receiving line, she turned to an aide and ordered the place card moved immediately. Sophie noticed. Diplomats were already entering, and the change could not be hidden. She did not argue. She stepped back, folded her hands, and completed the reception from a secondary position. Prince Edward watched her absorb the humiliation in silence, and she later told him in a recorded private conversation that the worst part was not losing the place. It was being corrected in front of people she had been asked to welcome. Charles confronted Camilla after the final guest left. He asked why she had changed an arrangement authorized by his office. She answered that Sophie needed to remember that helpfulness did not make her queen. The king went still. He understood that this was no longer about ceremony. It was about insecurity threatening royal order. The Lord Chamberlain documented the disruption that night. The office, responsible for organizing major palace events and household protocol, recorded how the last-minute change confused staff and weakened the receiving sequence. Anne witnessed the exchange outside the hall and told Charles that personal fear could not be allowed to interfere with state duty. From that night onward, Sophie's appointment became a serious possibility. Months later, Camilla received the confidential review and recognized the Windsor incident on its first page. Her anger sharpened at once. She no longer wanted explanations from courtiers. She wanted Sophie face to face. There were no aides in the room when Camilla faced Sophie. No secretaries. No palace officials to soften the words or record what followed. Only two women stood between a silent fireplace and a table holding the letter that had changed them both. Camilla wanted to know whether Sophie had pursued the position. Sophie wanted to preserve her dignity. Within minutes, restraint gave way to truths neither woman had ever spoken aloud. Camilla had summoned her to Clarence House under the careful description of a private family conversation. Clarence House was the King and Queen's London residence, often used for personal meetings away from the formality of Buckingham Palace. Sophie agreed to come only after confirming that Charles knew the meeting was taking place. She understood the danger. This was not simply a discussion between relatives. It was a confrontation between the woman losing authority and the woman being asked to carry it. The appointment letter rested on a low table between them. Camilla had placed it there deliberately. The formal document, which confirmed Sophie's duties and authority in writing, had become more than paper. It was the proof of the transfer, the symbol of the humiliation, and the one object neither woman could ignore. Camilla gripped the back of a chair and asked whether Sophie had enjoyed waiting patiently for the palace to decide she was more suitable. The queen kept her voice controlled, but her hands betrayed her. Sophie answered that she had never asked to replace anyone. She had accepted because the king requested her service, and because refusing would have created another crisis for a family already weakened by conflict. The tension hardened. Camilla pointed toward the chair beside her and said it had once been reserved for the woman trusted to guide the household. Sophie stepped forward, moved it back into place, and replied that trust could not be reserved forever. The words landed with brutal force. For the first time, the trusted confidant had challenged her directly. Camilla then demanded to know how much Sophie understood about the Windsor report. The written account had recorded the disrupted reception and the order to move her place card. Sophie revealed through a private, documented conversation that Charles had personally discussed the incident before offering her the position. The Queen's expression changed. Her husband had not merely approved the transfer. He had explained the case against her. Sophie drew her final boundary. She would perform the role without humiliating Camilla, but she would not allow the king's arrangements to be obstructed or palace staff to be undermined. Sophie opened the door to leave and found Charles standing in the corridor. The king had heard enough. The confrontation had exposed the pain, but not the power behind the decision. That truth was waiting inside the council room. Camilla believed Charles could restore the position with a sentence. She had seen him defend her before, resist pressure before, and reshape palace expectations in her favor. But this decision no longer belonged to the marriage alone. It had been supported by the king's senior household, endorsed by William, and defended by Anne. When Charles entered the council room carrying Camilla's request for reconsideration, he discovered that loyalty to his wife now stood against loyalty to the crown. Charles placed the handwritten letter beside Sophie's signed acceptance and left both documents untouched. The appointment had emerged from a confidential household review, a private examination of royal workload, diplomatic order, public confidence, and coordination among senior family members. That mattered because the role affected more than appearances. It determined who directed staff, controlled ceremonial timing, and prevented personal disputes from disrupting official events. William watched his father hesitate. The prince knew Charles possessed the final authority, but he also understood that reversing the announcement would weaken the palace from within. Anne's intervention and the Lord Chamberlain's recommendation had already made the decision institutional. The Lord Chamberlain was the senior official responsible for major royal ceremonies and household organization, so rejecting his findings would suggest that private emotion mattered more than official judgment. Charles finally unfolded Camilla's letter. She asked for the transfer to be delayed, but that was not her only condition. The Queen Consort demanded final approval over state banquet arrangements, meaning Sophie would hold the title while Camilla retained the actual power. The king read the sentence twice. The request transformed a plea for dignity into an attempt to preserve control. William chose his words carefully. He warned that changing the decision after the public announcement would make palace authority look vulnerable to pressure from inside the marriage. The future king was not attacking Camilla, but he refused to pretend the consequences were small. Charles heard the challenge clearly: protect his wife from discomfort, or protect the crown from appearing uncertain. Anne rejected the proposed compromise without hesitation. She told Charles that divided authority would preserve the rivalry, confuse staff, and force Sophie to seek Camilla's permission for responsibilities already granted by the monarch. The Princess Royal insisted that service could not function when two women believed they held the final word. Charles looked from Camilla's request to Sophie's acceptance. Then the king folded the letter and said the appointment would stand without restrictions. He signed the operational order, the document that formally transferred staff coordination and ceremonial authority to Sophie. The decision was final, but the danger had only moved closer. Sophie's first state reception would begin within 48 hours, and Camilla was still expected to attend. The palace had settled the hierarchy on paper. Now one glance, one delayed entrance, or one empty place beside the king could expose everything the family was desperate to conceal. Instead, it became the first unmistakable proof that Camilla's place within the royal machinery had changed. Sophie arrived early, reviewed the receiving order, and spoke calmly with every aide. Camilla entered later, and immediately noticed the difference. The staff no longer turned toward her for direction. The questions, the folders, and the final decisions moved toward Sophie, and every courteous gesture made the loss feel more real. Sophie checked the diplomatic order, confirmed the royal entrance sequence, and reassured nervous staff that no last-minute changes would be made without Charles's approval. The receiving order was the planned sequence in which senior royals greeted important guests, and even one change could create confusion or signal disrespect. She understood why the responsibility mattered. A smooth reception protected the dignity of the crown, while a public mistake could expose the family's private divisions. Camilla still entered beside the king. She remained queen, and no document had reduced her formal rank. Yet the transfer had removed the practical authority through which she once shaped the evening. Charles walked at her side, but she felt the difference immediately. Rank kept her near the monarch. Power now moved elsewhere. The first visible change came quietly. An aide approached Camilla with a seating question, hesitated, then turned toward Sophie for the final answer. The queen watched without speaking. Years of habit had been reversed in seconds, and the politeness of the exchange made the humiliation sharper. No one challenged her. No one needed to. Camilla leaned toward Charles and told him she felt like a guest inside her own household. The king replied that no one questioned her place beside him. She answered that everyone now understood the limit of her influence. He wanted to comfort her, but any reassurance sounded hollow, while staff continued carrying documents toward Sophie. The pressure became unbearable when the trusted confidant was asked to guide the next delegation forward. Camilla stepped away from the receiving line earlier than planned. In the corridor, she removed one glove and pressed it into her palm, struggling to steady her breathing. Palace staff had feared rebellion. Instead, she followed every instruction, and her cold obedience unsettled them more than open anger would have. Sophie faced her own test when a foreign guest congratulated her on becoming the palace's new leading lady. She corrected him immediately and gestured toward Camilla as queen. The defense was clear, public, and deliberate. Camilla heard it, but offered no acknowledgement. Later that night, Sophie received a message asking her to come alone to the king's private sitting room. She expected Charles. Camilla was waiting instead. The public test had ended without disaster, but the silence between them had grown heavier. What came next would be decided without protocol, advisors, or protection. Camilla did not summon Sophie to argue again. This time, there was no appointment letter on the table, and no chair placed like a challenge between them. The queen stood beside a darkened window, still dressed from the reception, and confessed what the position had truly represented. It was never only about authority. It was evidence that the palace had forgiven her. Losing it felt like being dragged back toward every judgment she believed she had survived. Camilla had asked to meet in the king's private sitting room, a quiet space used for personal conversations away from formal palace business. Charles deliberately withdrew before Sophie arrived. He believed no official explanation could heal what had become a deeply personal wound. The king had already made the decision. Now the two women had to decide what that decision would mean between them. Camilla spoke first. She explained that mastering ceremonies, welcoming foreign guests, and guiding major receptions had allowed her to feel useful rather than merely tolerated. Those duties mattered because they gave her visible proof that the household trusted her judgment. They also placed her at the center of royal service, not simply beside Charles as the woman he had chosen. The queen finally admitted what she had hidden behind anger. Watching staff turn toward Sophie made her fear the palace was preparing for a future in which she remained present but unnecessary. Her rank would survive. Her influence might not. She confessed that the deepest pain was not losing authority, but becoming symbolic rather than trusted. Sophie listened without interrupting. Then she revealed through their private recorded conversation that she had accepted the appointment with dread, not triumph. The trusted confidant knew one mistake would be called incompetence, while one success could be treated as a victory over Camilla. She had not entered the role feeling powerful. She had entered it knowing every decision might deepen another woman's humiliation. Camilla removed the ceremonial brooch she had returned to its case after the announcement and placed it on the table. The piece had traditionally been worn by the woman coordinating state receptions, making it a symbol of practical authority rather than rank alone. She told Sophie it now belonged with her. Sophie pushed the case gently back. She said accepting the position did not require taking every object, memory, or symbol associated with the queen. The refusal changed something. Camilla finally understood that Sophie was not trying to erase her. The transfer may have come from necessity, not revenge. Camilla made her choice before the meeting ended. She would attend the formal presentation of Sophie's responsibilities and support her openly. That gesture would define the crisis. But by morning, newspapers and broadcasters had already turned a private wound into a national judgment on Camilla's reign. By sunrise, the palace decision no longer belonged to the family. It belonged to headlines, broadcasters, crowds, and millions of people searching for meaning behind every carefully chosen word. Some saw Sophie's appointment as a reward for loyalty. Others saw it as evidence that Camilla's authority was shrinking. Yet one image outside Buckingham Palace captured the public mood more powerfully than any commentator. Two women holding signs bearing different names, standing together beneath the same royal balcony. Newspapers treated the transfer as the largest rearrangement of female royal duties in years. Broadcasters asked whether Sophie's rise reflected workload concerns, stronger public trust, or a deeper shift toward William's future reign. Operational responsibilities meant the practical power to organize staff, control event timing, and guide major ceremonies. Camilla still held the higher rank, but Sophie now carried the authority that shaped how the monarchy functioned in public. One London newspaper captured the tension with a split front page. Camilla appeared at an earlier state banquet on one side, while Sophie arrived at the latest reception on the other. Across both images ran the headline, "The Changing Face Beside the Crown." The message was impossible to miss. The Queen remained beside Charles, but the trusted confidant had become the woman managing what happened around them. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the gates. One woman held a sign reading, "Respect the Queen." Another carried the words, "Sophie serves without drama." Their disagreement became sharp, then unexpectedly quiet. Both lowered their signs and began speaking instead, capturing the national mood more honestly than the shouting commentators. The public was divided, but not entirely cruel. Camilla watched the morning broadcast alone. She listened as one commentator described her as the figure of yesterday's settlement. The Queen switched off the television before the discussion ended and sat without speaking. The phrase hurt because it reduced years of struggle, loyalty, and service to a chapter the monarchy had already begun closing. Sophie felt no victory. She read messages praising her as the royal family's new central woman, then asked her staff to remove them. The trusted confidant feared that celebration at Camilla's expense would poison the position before she could define it. The speculation ended at the formal presentation. Camilla entered beside Sophie, faced the assembled household, and personally handed her the state reception briefing folder, the official file containing the plans and instructions for major royal events. The gesture silenced the room. Sophie quietly told Camilla that everyone still recognized its queen. Camilla answered that they must also recognize the woman now responsible for holding the household together. The palace had shown unity, but one final truth still remained to be faced. Camilla did not recover the position. Sophie did not surrender it. Charles did not reverse the order, and the palace did not pretend that nothing had changed. The resolution came through something more difficult than victory: acceptance. One woman learned that royal authority could not become personal possession. Another learned that duty sometimes required stepping into a place shadowed by another person's pain. And the monarchy discovered that stability depended not on avoiding change, but on surviving it with dignity. Sophie formally assumed responsibility for state hosting, diplomatic receptions, household coordination, and the organization of senior royal women at major ceremonies. The operational transfer, meaning the practical movement of staff and decision-making authority, was completed without divided control. She would no longer need Camilla's approval to perform duties already assigned by the king. That clarity mattered because uncertainty had caused the conflict in the first place. Camilla remained queen, the king's consort, and the highest-ranking woman in the royal family. Her place beside Charles had not been taken. What changed was the way her importance would be measured. She no longer needed to control every entrance, seating plan, or ceremonial detail to prove she belonged. Her strength would now come from representing continuity beside the monarch, without turning every responsibility into a battle for influence. Charles finally spoke honestly with her in their private rooms. The king admitted that he had feared the decision would destroy the trust between them. Camilla answered that his silence had wounded her more deeply than the transfer itself. Yet she also admitted that protecting her from every consequence would not have been love. It would have been permission to continue a struggle that was damaging them both. Sophie rejected any language of triumph. She instructed her team never to describe the appointment as a promotion over Camilla. The trusted confidant insisted that her authority came from service, not rivalry. That principle became the foundation of her new role, and the reason palace staff began trusting her even more. The final proof came at the next major state banquet. Camilla entered beside Charles while Sophie waited inside to coordinate the receiving line, the formal order in which senior royals greet important guests. Their eyes met. The Queen gave a small nod. Sophie returned it, then opened the proceedings. Camilla had lost the position, but she regained control over the meaning of her response. Sophie became trusted, not because she defeated another woman, but because she showed restraint before, during, and after receiving power. Charles preserved the household by choosing stability over sentiment. The palace did not erase Camilla, and it did not crown Sophie as her replacement. It separated status from service. In doing so, both women discovered that dignity is not found in holding power forever, but in knowing when to carry it and when to let it pass. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.